Laying vinyl flooring. How do I lay vinyl? How can I put vinyl in my bathroom? What is the best way to fit vinyl? How do I cut vinyl? How do I seal vinyl? How do I stick vinyl? These are all questions that have been asked of us over the years on the DIY Doctor website. So we're putting a series of videos together on how to lay floor coverings in general, how to fit carpets, how to fit vinyl, carpets on underlay, carpets on adhesive. So the series will be, you can watch all of those together. I'm here today with Sam. Sam works for a good friend of mine, Kev Corcoran Carpets and Vinyl. They're a Somerset-based company. Every time we do an extension or build a house or whatever, he comes along and fits it out for the client, and a great company they are as well. You can see their details in the logo at the start and the end of this video. So today Sam is going to use our little tiny bathroom set as an example on how to lay vinyl flooring. He's going to run through this. It is a demonstration, so he will talk you through what he's going to do, actually fit a piece of vinyl and tell you how to do it. But before we start, whatever floor covering you're laying, make sure it's absolutely, especially with vinyl, make sure it's absolutely free from dust and floor blemishes, even to the point where you run your hand over the floor. If you feel a little lump or bump, you can be absolutely certain that's going to show through the vinyl. Absolutely certain. So get the floor as level and clean as you possibly can, hoover up all the dust, scrape anything off the floor that you need to, and when you're ready, when you start measuring, one of the common mistakes people make when they're doing any kind of fitting in a room is to measure just in one place and say, okay, this room is 8 foot by 4 foot or whatever. Measure in 3 places, measure the top, the middle and the end, because most rooms are definitely out of square. Okay, so make absolutely sure that you've got the biggest area to cut your vinyl or carpet or whatever. It's very, very easy to cut some off. It's almost impossible to add some on. And not without it being visible.
No,
anyway.
that's
okay, so measure in 3 places, make sure that you've got the biggest dimensions you can for the room. So as far as floor preparation goes, as long as if it's a timber floor, make absolutely sure it's completely clean or whatever. Sometimes we prime it. If it's out of level at all, then some self-leveling screed can be laid. You can see that in another video that we've got on how to level concrete floors. You'll see that. See us using some self-leveling compound there. So when you've got the floor prepared, you've cleaned it up, everything's ready, and you're going to do some measuring, you just hand it over to the guy who's going to lay it. So I'll talk to you later.
You do the easy bit, thanks.
See you later.
Right, I'm going to start with some double-sided tape. Now with any vinyl, obviously cutting it in is quite tricky. The last thing you want is the vinyl moving around whilst you're trying to cut it in. So we're going to start with just a simple roll of double-sided tape and hopefully a straight knife. Now you can tape as much or as little as you'd like to. Obviously, because I do it day in day out, I tend not to use too much tape, but to somebody who's not done it before, I would recommend taping all the way around the edges. That way, once you've cut the vinyl in roughly, you can be certain it's not going to move around all over the place whilst you're trying to cut it in, because that would be even harder than it already is. And I'm not poking for a pay rise. I'm just going to tape these edgings. Always go steady with the knives as well, because fingers are quite important. You don't want to lose any of those this morning. We've still got work to do. I'm just going to tape along the edge of the bath. This is the edge of the bath. Just no bath. I'm just going to pop a little bit just in front of the sink and the toilet pedestal. This is the sink and this is the toilet. Now that just means, obviously, when you've got vinyl, it's not magic. It doesn't just fall over the sink pedestal and it doesn't just fall over the toilet. You do have to cut around it, unfortunately. I'll show you how to do that in 2 minutes, but it will stop it moving around just in front there. Right, like I said, normally you would tape every area. I've taped enough for you guys to see exactly what I'm going to do. Now the next thing to do would be to grab your vinyl flooring, which I have measured and hopefully will fit. I cut it, normally I'd say allow sort of 10 centimetres in each direction. Once you've measured it, I'd allow 10 centimetres each way, just in case the walls run out of square, and then that way, you know, you've got problems trying to square it up or whatever. Like Mike said earlier, if it does run out and you haven't allowed enough, it means you've got to lay everything wonky, which will drive you around the twist, although you think you won't mind at the time. Right, so you've got your vinyl let out happily square in the bathroom with the pattern as square as you're happy with. I wouldn't recommend squaring it off of the bath panel. I'd pick an outside wall, then you know you're more likely to get it square. Now this is a hook blade. You can get the hook blades from your normal shops. I find a hook blade personally has more control over the vinyl, so you tend not to waver in and out as you're cutting it. So you've got your vinyl folded back, and all I would do is make a small incision on the corner and cut reverse, so that when you lay it in, you've got to think about how you're cutting it. It is a thinking game, because it's got to reach everywhere. So all I do to start with is just cut it in roughly. And sometimes it's worth just cutting off the waste so you can see exactly what you're doing, because otherwise you've got vinyl all up in the air, you don't know what you're doing, you can't see what you're doing, and that's when it all goes horribly wrong. Just keeping it square there. So like I said, to start with, cut off the waste, leave it a good couple of inches up the skirting board all the way around. And then this is your doorway here, so you just make those cuts. Like I said, think about how you're cutting it, because you've got to cut it reverse. So when you lay it in, it's still up the walls. It sounds daft, but I've seen people cut it the wrong way around. They lay it in and then have a sad face. So just by making those few cuts, straight away, everything seems to sit in place. And like I said, you don't need to use a lot of tape, but you know, I would advise, if you're doing it for the first time ever, to tape all the edges, then that way you know you're happy. Now what I would suggest is to pull the vinyl back once you've made those few cuts to keep it in place, and just use your knife just to lift off the top layer of the tape, if it'll come off with me. It might not. This is what we said about clean floors. That leaves the second half on the surface that you're fitting, so just pull that back and take the tape off in front of the bath, and we know that that definitely isn't going to move around there. You can be a bit fiddly getting this top layer off. Drive you around the twist. There we go. I can push that onto the tape. Now we know that that isn't going to go anywhere. One thing I would say is when you're working with vinyl, you do have to go quite gentle with it, because if you go rough, you can rip it. If you force any of the little cuts that you've made, it will tear. And once you've torn vinyl, it never looks the same. I've seen it happen. You know, nobody's perfect. Right. So we've got it taped now, and fixed, and cut in roughly. Now in front of the toilet is always the trickiest bit for everybody. Now what I would say, normally quite often you'll have a waste pipe around the back of the toilet. So if you make your first cut slap bang square in the middle of the toilet, so when it comes back round, your join is directly behind the back of the toilet. Once you've made your first cut, just take one side and slowly move it round. Now what you want to do is just cut it into little triangles, making small cuts, and then just feeding it slowly. And gradually, it's not a quick process. Toilets are probably the hardest area to do, if I'm honest, because they've got too many things to cut around. You've got a lot of tiny little cuts, but if you do one side at a time, then you know you're always doing okay. You just don't want to rush these things. You just just got to take your time. There. And once you've made all your little cuts, you should end up with it fully around the toilet. You should, if you've got it square and you haven't forced anything, the cut that you made originally should meet up perfectly at the back of the toilet. Just finish this side. And voila! Everything meets up perfectly, which is ideal. Now in the corners are always quite hard to cut in as well. Now everybody does everything a different way. Now what I do is force the corners in so you can see the corner that you need to fit into. Phones are all on the go now. What I do is just look at where your corner is, and on the reverse side you just make that incision and cut away the corner. Now cutting it always a little bit bigger is probably better. That way, you don't end up with a missing bit of vinyl in the corner of the room. Let me do the same in the other corner. Just folding it back, and it's all by eye really, but like I said, it's always better to allow a little bit, but then once it's cut, you can just sit it down into the corner. So, already you can start to see, looking good. Modest as well. Right. Just take off the tape on the other side. Now you know that side's fixed, it's not going to go anywhere, so you can just fold it back. One thing I would say with vinyl is you don't ever, when you've got it folded back, you never want to stand on it, you never want to crease it, because that crease can always be a problem to try and get back out after. It's not the friendliest stuff to crease, so do go steady, you don't want to go kneeling around on it. Just removing this tape again. Glad I didn't tape too much, I'd have been here all day. More tape. I'm going to leave that bit of tape because it's just a pain in the butt. Right. I'm forcing it over, cut the other corner in as well. Once it's all cut in, and I mean the term I would use is roughed in, because you cut it in roughly so you can see where everything is, make sure everything reaches everywhere, and then, to be honest, the best thing I could say would be to go and have a cup of tea, because it's always better to let the vinyl settle down, climatise to the room temperature. Vinyls can expand and contract in different temperatures. Obviously when you're in the bath or the shower and the bathroom's boiling hot, then the vinyl goes very soft and supple, and in turn can expand a little bit. So when you are cutting it in, which I'll show you how to do in 2 minutes, is cut it just a millimetre short, and then that way, by eye it doesn't look visibly short, but when the bathroom gets boiling hot, it doesn't all expand and go bubbling everywhere, because that's not what you want.